Hello, my name is Eddie Tudoran. I'm a professor of information science at University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and I'm serving as track co-producer alongside Samantha Maxim and Prasant Sutakal for Virtual Track G, Global Issues in Data Analytics and Management. It is my pleasure to introduce the next session, Leadership in Data Governance. And in this session, you'll hear about guidance, methods, tools, and various tips for effective data governance. Before I hand things over to our speaker, I have a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, this session is being recorded, and all the recordings are going to be uploaded to the CDOIQ YouTube channel about 3 months after the symposium. Any presentations that you see today is going to be included in the proceedings of the symposium. Finally, there's a question and answer section at the end of this talk. And if you have any questions, you can submit them at any time using the Whova app, the Q&A tab. And I saw that there were a number of questions already submitted. With that, I'll turn things over to this session's speaker, Theresa Ancick, a data governance strategist and consultant from Accura Business Services. Theresa, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. My name is Theresa Ancick, and I have been a data governance strategist and speaker for the last 5 years. I started off 30 years ago in data warehousing and data architecture, moved into data visualization, followed by data pipeline management, which kind of gave me the eureka moment when I heard about data governance coming on the scene. So I grabbed on tight, and I have not let go since. I want to talk today about the leadership in data governance. And I'm taking a unique approach to this presentation in that I am going to present you all with how I would imagine presenting updates to my executive council, whether my executive council is made up of one individual or a board. I know there's some debate in our industry about how big the council should be. But what I put together here is a list of metrics and measurements and how I recommend to my customers that we pull together the updates for the executive council. Uh-oh, I'm trying to go to the next slide. This is a little bit about myself, blah, blah, blah. A lot of organizations, when you look at their current state and what's driving their data governance, we hear this common threads. We have data in several places with different definitions. We don't know how the formulas are calculated. We can't tell you all the places. We have our privacy data. This outlines some of the most common reasons that are driving data governance in organizations. So once an organization identifies that they just cannot continue because of these challenges, they oftentimes want to create their data as an asset, their data strategy. A lot of organizations are establishing their GDOs as mandated by various authorities. So when we talk about data as an asset, I just want to touch on this a little bit because a lot of times it's glossed over and we don't really understand what it means. So when I'm working with an executive leadership board, I like to make sure that they understand that it means that we can check these boxes when it comes to our critical data elements. It means we know where it's introduced in our ecosystem. If it's a formula or a metric, we have transparency and visibility in that metric. We publish a complete definition. We manage and confirm the quality. We have standards for its transportation. We use it consistently. We protect its privacy and security. We know if it's public and who has access to it. So these are the boxes that you want to check when you hear your data and data management professionals talk about data as an asset. I think that's important for everyone to know. It's also important to know how it works with the future state in that from the inception of the data, we start connecting these security components and the definition and the handling and what metrics, and that information is attached at the source and it travels through the data share and it becomes transparent when you get to your data assets. The next slide came up quickly because I barely touched my space bar. It talks about designing a picture. It doesn't have to look like this one. This is a common one that I see, but it talks about what is the data governance office going to be to your organization. So here we have at the top the Enterprise Data Governance Council. I like to abbreviate that as the EDGE Council. I thought it was pretty quippy. And then you have your data office, your data governance office. Is it going to be a standalone office? I see a lot of organizations that start a grassroots or a progressive approach where it becomes embedded in the data management and then later becomes an entity unto itself. And it's responsible for creating the conduits for all of these dimensions to contribute to and draw from the centralized data governance tool repository area that can travel with that data. So they've got a lot of work pulling the domains and the business owners at the bottom, engaging your risk and compliance teams, and then creating the conduits for all of the various areas of data management so that you can create a robust program with a lot of benefits for your organization. Usually not done overnight, but it's good to have an idea of your future vision of your program. So I encourage everyone to create that imagery. You'll use it a lot. Whoops, what happened? I'm going to go back and share my screen. My apologies, folks. Okay, we're back. When you have these items, you've got your data governance, your goal, your end goal is to embed your data governance in your company's fabric. New assets are curated before they go to production. Terms and assets are drawn down from the business glossary, and the business glossary becomes your term policy, if you will. New IT projects are added to the term definition when introducing the data set. IT projects are considering their impact to the data ecosystem as part of the framing out of that project. Users are asking for the users are asking for definitions as part of the creation of your new data assets. And your information security is notified as soon as new data is introduced into your ecosystem. Data quality becomes both reactive and proactive. These are really some of the goals and benefits to creating a good program. So now I want to get into how we might update that Executive Data Governance Council. And I use metrics. I created these slides. I simplified a lot of this information because I wanted it to be easier to absorb during a presentation, but an actual Power BI would not have numbers inside circles. I do much better visualizations than that. But it breaks down into 4 main categories. When you want to see if your data governance program is progressing, is it getting stymied in certain areas? There's 4 topics that I like to include in my success metrics for the program itself. So I want to know, how embedded in the environment are we? Have we consumed our entire data ecosystem? So we have 21 sources crawled out of 100. I have, how many of my reports have we crawled? How many active reports are there? How many inactive reports? Have we been able to retire technical debt? A lot of folks, when we get into identifying their library of reports, we might discover that we've got 20,000 reports and 2,000 employees. So we've got a technical debt retirement discovery that we need now to update our charters so that we're including that in the process. Do we have curated reports? Do we know who the owner is? Do we know why we invested money in the creation of this report? Who the users are? And I also want to know that in whatever tool you're using, you are creating those jobs so that we're regularly pulling that metadata into our data governance environment that tells me what tables, what changes to those tables, new tables, so that we can continuously retrieve that metadata and have a full picture of our data ecosystem. We want to know what is in our backlog, and also what is our current crawl plan. This is where we might be ingesting, starting at our data warehouse and then going backward to our source systems. It depends on where you're anchoring the program, but I definitely want to create visibility and transparency for the executive council to say, how well are we getting our program embedded in our data ecosystem? The next one is engagement. I want to know that we are engaging the organization in our data governance tool and in our data governance process and procedures. It really is a shift in thought process and culture around data in our organization. So I want to know in the tool, how many searches are people doing? How many people are going to the catalog? How many people are using the business glossary? How many total time hours are spent in the tool? And is it going up or down? How many collaboration messages are going back and forth in the tool? These are all metrics that tells me if we are going in the right direction and the right pace. The top performers area is also interesting, because you see which assets are being the most watched, which reports are being the most depended on, and who are your top users. I also give a little breakdown by the top users by department if that's available in your tool. The next area for updating the executive council is consistency. Am I delivering, as a data governance leader, am I delivering consistency to the organization? Because if we're not delivering consistency, what are we doing here? So I want to be able to demonstrate the number of terms published, the number of terms in the backlog, how many are in draft status, how many of you added this month, how many terms do you have associated, so that people that are looking for that term can find that term where it is appearing on the reports, and where is that term being introduced into our ecosystem. How many odd terms are related to each other. How many custom fields, how much extended metadata are you able to add and populate around our terms? You may find that you also want to keep track of a term's published date so that you can regularly review it for accuracy and update anything. In addition to that, you may have responsibility assignments and things like that. So you want to know when you've added that additional information that you're also getting it filled in by your data stewards. Terms published, I don't count a term as being successfully published until the definition has exceeded 150 characters. And that is because you want to avoid at all cost. I call it cheeseburger definitions. I wish I could find the person that presented that the first time. I thought it was fantastic. I didn't originally coin that, but the definition of a cheeseburger is a burger with cheese. You need to avoid that. If people go to your business glossary and that's the type of definitions you're providing, they will never come back. So you want to make sure that your definitions are robust. I also have a document with 25 questions that I ask anyone that's curating a term, the data stewards, and it is so that we can draw all that knowledge out of our organization about that term and get it into the business glossary. So this kind of gives you an idea of how many reports did I change. When I create a term, I oftentimes find that I've got that term on 52 reports, but when I do a term analysis, which is a very specific item, I find out, are we getting that term from the same sources? Usually not. Is that what we want? Is it okay? Sometimes it is okay to draw from a different source, but if it's in the data warehouse, we really want to make sure that our reports are drawing it down from the proper sources. Are we abbreviating it the same across our reports? And is there any other terms that are reports that are using the same title, but it means something else, which we regularly find. So that's where we start creating that consistency in our assets that are currently in our production server. A lot of people miss that part of their program, so I wanted to make sure I spent a moment on that. The last part is the services. Data, I am a servant leader. Data governance in my approach is very much a service to the organization. We are creating the conduits. We are helping people onboard into this. So I want to be able to say our service desk success metrics. These are just a few of the services that I wanted to demonstrate for you, but people that are asking for I call it a new asset, could be a report, could be a cube, could be something in the data warehouse. Anybody that's asking for anything, what do we have in our backlog? I want to share that with my executive team. And how long is it taking us to respond to those requests? Schema compares is a very specific thing that a lot of tools allow you to do in the data governance area. And it may not be done by the data governance team, but a lot of these requests route through the data governance tool. So we are delivering schema compares to the organization so that it gives you insight into changes that are coming from upstream applications, so that when you upgrade an application, I can tell you that this is the physical changes, and then we do an impact analysis. And these are the 17 reports that are going to be impacted when you upgrade your application. The data governance is very much involved in that process and helping to speed that up so that you have less breakage downstream. This is an area that a lot of organizations that I work with have struggled with, and ones that I visited myself. How many new requests are coming in where they want to bring their data and onboard their data into the data governance data catalog. So we want to be able to say, how long is it taking us to turn around? How many of these requests are we getting? I've had both extremes. I've had it where we've gone to do data governance and everybody was like, oh, we don't know what you're talking about. We're not really interested. And it's a task to get people engaged. And then I work with other organizations where we're like, okay, we're going to step into data governance. And we've had a stampede from the organization. They were so ready for it. They were so hungry. And there was so many people that were asking to get onboarded that we had to staff up in order to maintain the proper capacity for the program. So these metrics are one way that you can help identify, do I have the right number of people? Are we serving are we meeting our SLAs? And do we need more engagement activities, or do we need to widen our onboarding conduit? I also added a fun little spot for access requests as well, just to give some visibility in that. So then, as the data governance director, I go through those metrics with the executive council. I end with this slide. This is my roadmap progress, where I have these are just a few of the swim lanes that I have set up. I also have a communication swim lane and a few others. And you can see where we're at in our roadmap, and are we on time? Is there something that's being slid back? Are we bringing something forward because we're ready for it now? Do I have any roadblocks and barriers? And this is kind of where I start talking about roadblocks and barriers. I have a separate slide at the end where everybody contributes any roadblocks they're having, but this is where you want to watch out for data owners who aren't interested in participating, data stewards who've kind of dipped out. I'm too busy doing this and I don't have time to curate any terms. So it's really something that the executive council needs to jump in and make sure that that engagement is continuing in your organization, and then everyone in your organization understands the importance of the success of the program and helps the data governance office reinforce that engagement through the organization. The data domain, this is where I do a little quick update. I try to bring in a couple of my domain owners to do some presentation, get some FaceTime with the executive council, talk about how they're evolving their own particular domain. There is an evolution to setting up a domain where I'm helping them with building a catalog, and then we talk about curating a term. So when we onboard a domain, there is a training arc that takes place as they mature through all of the goals. So we are doing those training programs. We're setting up some data quality. We're defining the business glossary. We also curate their reports and so forth. So I try to get a couple of guest speakers on the domains. And at this point, I sit down and allow the different leaders of the data management teams to stand up. I am responsible for pulling this slide deck together. This is how it really reinforces for me as a data governance leader to get that collaboration. The information security leader is responsible for sharing some of the metrics around access requests. I also add the tickets for anyone in the organization to be able to report a data exposure. And those route to the information security team. But again, I bring them through the data governance office. They explain that we've had these many reported exposures. They're kind of fun too. Sometimes somebody will say, oh, there was a piece of paper in the bathroom. And then other times it's somebody sent me 20,000 names and addresses of AIDS patients, and you have to react very strongly to that. So this is where we talk about different exposures that have been reported by our throughout our organization. The information security takes that and they remediate it accordingly. Sometimes they will bring somebody in for additional training and do a write-up, and other times it's a much stronger response. The compliance and data policy team members get to talk about any new data specific policies that are coming on board, and how they are rolling out. How is the policy being brought through the data governance team? How is the data governance team providing transparency for that policy through the organization and creating the ability to make sure that that policy is being adhered to? Then the data quality team has a couple of slides, actually. I'm only including two here, but usually there's a couple more. This is reactive data quality, or what I like to call adverse data event reporting. These talk about, we had 18 adverse events this month. We are trending up or down with the different events. What is the themes across our root causes this month? You can see a breakdown over here where I've said that there's some technology failures. I could have some poorly written code in my pipelines. I can have third-party vendor data. I think this is a little backwards. I think third-party vendor data should say 8 and the code corrections should say 2. That would be more realistic. And then you'll see down here, I've got all 18 events. If you click on this, it'll give you the detail of each of those events. But in here, you kind of see how many assets were impacted by the event, how many individuals were impacted by the event. And then one of the things that I've been able to achieve with a couple of teams is the ability to create a cost. How much did it cost us to have to remediate this event? I create the cost down here. If there is an ECR, it's $1,000, and I share very openly what the algorithm is and how I ended up with that costing in my adverse event summary. So this is one of them, reactive data quality, and it really does get that executive team more aware of the types of challenges that are coming in as far as the reactive data quality. Proactive data quality. I've got 85 rules in my proactive data quality library. 40 of them were triggered this period. I saved $35,000 in cost savings because I was able to report them to the business and they were fixed before the end of the day. before that information impacted any of our reports downstream. When we do proactive data quality, we always have a leader in the organization in the area that is responsible for creating the issue or remediating the issue. And then you can see here that the director of finance had 7 code red data quality items that were triggered. The data warehouse manager, or the warehouse manager rather, had 5, 9, 10 events. How many are code red? How many were warnings? Again, I give full transparency on how I cost that, and a SLA summary of how long it's taking us to get those things fixed. The AI and analytics team is responsible for bringing in any AI new objects. They're a fantastic team. They've always got new assets going to production. We want to highlight those assets and make sure that they're valued and received and getting used in the organization. So this is a slide where we talk about what reports we have in production. Have we retired anything because it's aged out or it's not being used? What's in our backlog? What are we doing with the data this month? So we want a slide for the director of AI and analytics. Projects impacting, this is a little sparse, but it's really about project management team being invited to the executive council meeting to talk about what projects they have going on and how it's impacting the data. I just went to the NASA demonstration here and I loved it. I almost stood up and cheered, made a fool of myself. I loved it when he said every project has to have a data management plan attached to it. And I was like, bravo. Oh, so good. Anyway, so here's the project slide, the data pipeline development. So the infrastructure team comes in and talks about anything that could be changing in our pipeline. Is it making us better? What kind of anomalies can we expect to come up? How many server outages? Is it going up or down? And the last slide, I'm talking about roadblocks and barriers. So this is where any of the data leaders can bring their roadblocks and barriers forward to that executive council, and they can collaborate different ways to solve those issues. Any action items that need any advice given, we covered that on the last slide. This slide is filled out after the meeting and posted in our tool of all of our updates to the Data Governance Committee at the end. Please don't forget about kudos. It is the funnest part of this whole thing. Who are these rock stars in your organization? What did we do to help gamify? Where are we at with the domains? Jane Smith is doing a rock star job. We really want to encourage the executive council to reach out to these folks and personally thank them for helping make data governance a success in our organization. Lastly, I have a slide here on savings and speed to market. Every data governance member should be able to understand and discuss openly, why are we doing data governance? It's really, I need everyone to become evangelists for the program and to be able to explain that these non-value added activities are going to go away and we are going to have value added activities. I encourage them to learn more about how many requests we get in your BI team that say, hey, how come this number on this report doesn't match this number on that report? Those types of activities are going to start diminishing as your data knowledge increases in your organization. So people are going to be able to understand. They're going to also have people available on your tool to ask questions to directly. Who's the owner of this report? I can call the owner and the owner can respond. The steward will respond. So it's kind of spreading that out in the organization, but it's also getting your capacity back so that you will have faster remediation, faster discovery, faster Speed to market, because we'll be able to reuse code. We're not searching for where to pull that information down. I already know because of my tool. We're already using that on 72 reports. I'm just going to go find it, the reusable code out of the business glossary. And I'm going to be able to get this report done that much faster. So you're going to notice that your speed to market is going to be a lot quicker with data governance as well. So these are just a few of the benefits that I try to bring up at the end of every meeting. If possible, I try to create measurements and cost savings and returns on investments. That's another presentation altogether. But hopefully during the course of this and being able to download this, it can inspire you to create that leadership and update the leadership and understand and give you visualization and insight into when you want to change the team size, identify different players and encourage participation and help them remove roadblocks and barriers. Oh, that went a lot faster than I thought it would. I probably spoke too fast. I don't have my phone to see if we have any questions coming in. Let's see if we have anything.
We do have quite a lot of questions. I think we're up to 12 right now.
Awesome.
So I'm glad we have plenty of time to kind of go over them. We do have
sorry.
a lot of questions.
Oops, sorry.
So let me kind of start from top to bottom. Right. First one, how can leaders effectively communicate the importance of data governance to their organizations?
Early and often. The more a lot of governance programs are hinged on successful leadership. I had one company reach out to me early on when I started really consulting full-time in data governance. And it was a nationally known large pizza chain. So use your imagination. And the C-suite of the company reached out to me and said, hey, listen, we know we need data governance. We're not sure what it is, and we're not sure how to lead it. So we need you to spend 6 weeks with us and educate us on what it is. They were able to really it came from leadership, where in a lot of other organizations that I support, it's a kind of a grassroots approach. And our first objective is to try to get leadership support to move forward, because it is critical to the success of the program. So if you have an executive council with more than one person on it, as a data governance director, I try to cycle through those leaders and include them in different activities each month that can help us to more fully communicate data governance, even inside IT at the various domains. Sometimes I will bring them into a domain committee meeting or a team meeting. I know a lot of people are moving away from those committee meetings. Cool. But a lot of them are getting their data owners together once a month for a meeting, and they'll also pull their data stewards together once a month, which I strongly advocate for. And I will bring those leaders into that meeting and have them get to know the data stewards and talk to them. They enjoy having that FaceTime with the executive leadership, and it really does give them a charge, knowing that it's important and visible at their level.
Thank you. The next one, how can technology and domain leadership evolve in data domain when the technology and methodologies are changing? What are the soft and hard skills one needs to acquire?
I've seen it. I'm going to give you an example. The data liaisons in the data governance office are connecting with the business, and the soft skills are critical. I've also had a very successful deployment when we had a data governance director who was very, very strong in the concepts, pulling people together, the communications, and they yoked her with a lead architect whose role was to get IT and the data teams on board data governance. So they kind of split, and we got the domains going through the director of data governance, and then she had a lead architect that was pulling together the other side of the business, and it really worked quite well together. So I think that the soft skills are critically important. The organization is also very important. I've been called into more than one data governance team with the goal of pulling their program out of the garbage. There's no shortage of data governance deployments that have struggled to get off the ground. When I do get called into one like that, it's usually what I see is chaos. I see that we did not take into account that data governance is a service, and we're calling each other up and saying, hey, can you crawl this new data? And hey, someone needs access to such and such. So it's really important to understand the services and the underpinnings and pillars that you need to stand that program up. So if you're standing up a finance team, you're going to know that you need petty cash and the processes around how you're going to handle that petty cash. It's very similar on the data governance side. There are things that you need processes and procedures for. I talked a little bit about doing schema compares and impact analysis, assistance through the data governance team as a service. And that is two of the ways that I help understand the technology changes. Where are we with developing that lineage? And so when you do have that lineage and the infrastructure team who's onboarded says, we want to move this to the cloud, we're able to say, okay, these are the connection strings, and these are the ETLs, here's some code, and here's some assets that are going to be impacted by that change. And so we're constantly working and sharing with the other entities what's happening upstream, which has been a point that of struggle for a lot of organizations that is often solved with data governance.
Thank you. Next question, there's some. It says IT and IM. Should IT report to IM?
Oh, should information technology report to information management?
That's kind of what I saw. Data management. Data governance. I think that's what they're asking.
I don't know that I would be qualified to answer that, but I will tell you that data governance kind of sets between, I get the question a lot, should it be on the business side or should it be on the technology side? To which I say, yes, it should be on the business side. It should be on the technology side. If you can find a comfortable place where they can report up to a chief strategy officer or be able to sit in between those two entities in your org chart comfortably, I would recommend that. If you don't have that, I would lean towards having it on the IT side. I would lean into the IT and with a hard focus on the business in the beginning, because we're really getting a lot of benefit out of bringing those other the lineage and all of the technology components to build that tool to help the business.
Okay, thank you. Next one. Can we discuss likely transferable leadership skills required?
Transferable leadership skills. You need people.
Yeah, transferable.
Yeah. Leadership skill, it's this servant leader. You need to make sure that when we discover things, when we bring in the BI assets. And we discovered that there's 20,000 reports that have never been. It is so important that you have the skill of not reacting strongly to that. You're going to make discoveries. A lot of times, nobody's ever asked them to retire technical debt. They've been sprinting and trying to pick up and service an unhappy customer base for a long time. So if it's not been a maintenance issue and nobody's asked for it, it may not have come up for them. So I think the transferable skill of being able to go in a very helpful management, a helpful approach is going to be critical. I can't tell you how many times I work with people. They're sensitive to having some warts exposed, but it's information that we know exists. We know this is coming up, and I'm here to help. That's really what it is. I know it's called governance, but it's really a support.
Okay. Kind of related to this, the next one, what is the place of leadership, capital L, in data governance?
The place, I like that question. The place of leadership in data governance is everywhere. The more leadership is engaged in your data governance, the more successful your data governance is going to be. So there's a checklist of things that that I want you to consider when you're signing your leadership up. It means that they are going to have data as an asset into the organization, that they're going to be engaged at a level that they're not used to being engaged. And sometimes they don't care to hear about, third-party data challenges. But when I add cost to that and I say this vendor is costing us $42,000 a year in bad information, we can never get it on time. They change the format. They change the content. So we're breaking it, we're breaking down when we try to ingest that information. When we start adding cost to that, leadership starts to respond. And up until now, they've never had visibility into a lot of this. The person in the BI team is working with the person at the vendor and saying, can't do your file. So when you get into data governance, especially with third party, I'm bringing in the vendor relationship manager out of our procurement team to those metrics. I am bringing the business owner that needs that third party data to the table. And I am telling them this vendor is now, we had this much trouble. And a lot of times they've never seen that before. I'm also sharing it with the executive team. So they're getting embedded, more knowledgeable about the data pipeline and the data pipeline challenges. So it is going to bring their education around those items up a little higher. Do they all want to know about those things? Sometimes they really don't. Do they need to know what it is that we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're creating that data as an asset? Yeah, they do. So I do also want to make a point that on that slide deck that I shared earlier, I do not have every single slide and every single update. I have the important slides. And if I'm not there yet, I never take a slide off. I leave it on because I don't want it to leave their conscious that this is going, and it goes very much in alignment with the roadmap. So I just wanted to share those two things as well. I may not have the leader of information security at every single update, but I will gather their slide metrics and make sure they're published.
Thank you. The next one is, what should be the ideal ratio of data to technology leaders?
Wow. The ideal ratio of data to technology leaders is going to depend a lot on your industry vertical. If you are a technology company, your ratio is going to look much different than if you are a bank or if you are a florist. So that's a really difficult single ratio to come up with, but it is something that if you're working with any kind of digital transformation or consulting firm, they should be able to help narrow that down for you. I'm sorry I couldn't offer more than that, but I don't think that anything I threw out should be dependent on.
So it's more of a case by case. You need to know your business.
It really changes from industry to industry. And
okay, so we have enough time to go through more questions.
Great.
And thank you everyone for asking so many. How do organizations ensure the right infrastructure is available to support the growing data?
The right infrastructure to support the growing data. For me, it will show up in my metric slide where I see that I've got a lot of information and I haven't curated it. I don't know who owns it. I've got critical data elements in my backlog that we're not getting curated. We don't have a term for it yet. It's going to show up there. If I'm not getting the success metrics and the milestones met, it's probably because I have a capacity issue in my data governance team. And so I would, as a leader, I would talk to my data governance leader about the different ways that we can create more speed to market for some of these items, but that's where it would show up. That would really tell me that I need more technology leaders. If the backlog of my access request is too high, because now I'm getting visibility in all of those delicious backlogs. So I have 400 reports in my backlog. That's too many. What's going on? How can we reduce those? It takes 15 days to get access to a table, or sometimes 15 weeks. Trust me, I've seen it. It could take too long to get your crawls set up, your terms curated, and the different dimensions. So really pay attention to what's in those metrics, and talk a lot with your data governance team about what we can do and where you might need to increase your capacity. But remember, when I say that, you should be getting some capacity back. So look for that too.
Okay. The next question, I think I have an answer as far as the organizers. How do I get copies of these slides, please? That's the question.
Oh, I'm so happy that people are asking for copies of my slides, because that is an indication. That's a success metric for me, that people like what they saw, hopefully. So
I've been told that they would be included in the conference proceedings. Now, if that does not happen for some reason, I think they can always reach out to you. And
absolutely. If you want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to send you copies of the slide deck. And I also have a list of agreements that you can consider when setting up your executive council, that says, as a leader in this, I acknowledge these 6 or 7 things that I'm going to hear about, things I'm not used to, that I'm going to be a cheerleader in the organization to make sure that the communication is disseminated on how important this program is and things like that. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that I did talk about a lot of the chaos, and I want to add one more thing for the leadership for their data governance program. And this was a learning curve for me, because I used to hate charter documents, couldn't stand them. Nobody ever reads them. And now I don't live without them. And one of the things that I kept seeing is the chaos. And oftentimes you have either leadership changeover, or you have a new member join the team, or a new data steward comes on board. And there are different frameworks for data governance. You usually go through those frameworks and make your selection at the beginning. But what I see is somebody will join the team and say, you guys are doing it wrong. You're supposed to go from top down. You're supposed to put your policies out there and hold people accountable to the policy. You're doing it wrong. Or you get a new leader and they're unsure and shifting things. So by creating a charter document, you are actually putting in writing the approach that you're taking, the roles that you're setting up, the priorities of the team. And what we do is we create that charter document and memorialize those decisions. We require the executive leadership to sign off if we're going to go in any other direction. So that means that when me and the data governance team gets somebody that's like, you're doing it wrong, or they want to introduce things, or why aren't we working on policies? We should be doing policies right now. We should be doing this over here right now. Or you have a stampede of people at your door. God bless you if you do, because it's wonderful, of people wanting their data onboarded. We can say, here's our charter document. This is what we have to do because the executive council is telling us. If you want to change this, then I need to take you to go talk to the executive team. Most of the time, that is enough for them to say, okay, you guys have thought this through, I'm going to fall in line. Otherwise, I have seen situations where we have got the elevator on the 10th floor and it gets brought down to the first or second floor, and it takes our capacity and our morale, and we're trying to gain focus, and it's all over the place again. So I have a charter document. If you reach out to me, I'll be happy to share it with you. And I highly recommend that you keep that in mind for your program, that it is critically important. And I've completely changed my opinion of how that works because I've seen it keep the team focused in multiple occasions.
I guess the next one, it's more about data dictionary. How do you leverage the different features of a data dictionary? For example, definition versus README.
Definition versus what?
README.
README.
Like a README file, or yes.
Okay, so when it comes to the data dictionary, I worked with several different tools, and I've helped clients select the tool that's right for them. Almost every tool allows me to create custom fields as part of that. I call it extended metadata, and it has done a lot to help add more context. I think in curating your reports, there's a lot of opportunities to add to those reports. We have a business description and we have a technical description of that report. So by marrying what my technologist has to say about the report with what the business says the report is, does, how it's used, who owns it, what day did it go to production, that's a custom field. Is it an operational report, a regulatory report, or an analytic report? So when you get into disaster recovery, I need my operational reports to be at the front of the line when we come back up and online. So we are able to add that context as well. Who is the developer of the report? I like to add the developers of the report because now it's their names attached. So we want you to provide great code and great support for that asset. You're now going to be able to be notified when anything breaks on that report. So we have an owner and a steward. The date it went to production, sometimes the original service request. Oftentimes, if there's any artifacts that were created during that process for that report, we can add a link that's going to give you the artifacts to that report as well. So I like to get all of the things to a fault, I think sometimes. And those are some of the ways that I add things to my data catalog in terms of extending that metadata, adding more context. If it's a data catalog that is the tables and fields that support an application, I will look to upload the data dictionary that was delivered by that application. That data dictionary is going to be too vague for the business to depend on it for the terms, but it can become part of the catalog so that you've got transparency in the data dictionary and assist your technologists in what table and what field to find things in.
Okay, and we'll have about 6 more minutes and 2 questions left.
Awesome.
Do you allow solutions, maybe proposed solutions, to be posted with the roadblocks and challenges?
Yes, I am hoping that by the end of that's a great question. Thank you, whoever asked that. When we talk about roadblocks and challenges to the executive committee, I might talk about some of the things that I was able to clear up on my own. But if I have two data owners that are both using the term closed loan, but they mean two different things, this team over here says a closed loan is when it's sold in the warehouse to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And this team over here is calling a closed loan something that underwriting has signed off on and the wire transfer went out. They're two very distinct definitions, and neither one of the owners want to change their assets to use a different term. I am going to bring that to the executive committee. That is a roadblock and a barrier. You guys are going to uncover terms where there's mean multiple things in your organization. So the executive committee is going to take that roadblock and barrier. I don't think I want to try to wrangle these two higher up directors, but when you bring it to the committee, they're going to make a decision and then we'll make a plan to go forward. I try to give them a heads up before the meeting on the types of roadblocks and barriers. It could mean that, you know, this domain is not evolving like it should because they're just not interested, or they're terms, they're giving me cheeseburger definitions and it's devaluing our business glossary. So those are the kind of things. And always by the end of that meeting, I am hoping that we can make a plan going forward, or a plan for me to meet with an individual member of that committee to come up with the next action, and they'll jump in and help me out. We may not discuss it during the meeting, but it will be shortly after.
And the last question, which I think it seems also interesting, as a data officer who also report to a line manager with little or no experience in data governance, at what point do you escalate issue to management when standard has been compromised in the name of saving cost?
That I would ask if a standard, it depends on what you're making. I mean, if you're making blood pressure medicine, you should be ringing the oh my God bell real quick. If you're standard, if you're making teeny babies, stuffed animals, then I'm not sure how quick. So it's going to depend again on the industry vertical, but I am, as a data governance person, I create a service desk ticket, and anybody that wants to come to me or my team, they can open a ticket and I will get notified and I will reach out to you and I will assist you in either, if you're in the business and you're looking for something, or you think something's confusing, or you want us to go in and say, listen, we're using this acronym 5 different ways from Sunday and it's confusing. This report has caused a lot of confusion. I am living for that. I want that stuff because that's the consistency that I'm going to provide the organization. So keep in mind that your data governance team and leadership should be looking to jump in on those things and assisting. If it's a local issue, I want that first. If I can help you resolve the problem, I'm going to. If I can't, I'm going to bring it to the executive council. A lot of times when I'm working with a leader who doesn't know data governance, didn't ask for data governance, didn't want data governance, and I've had a few, a lot of times I'm like, you know, here's where you're at, here's the metrics, and I'm about to go explain this to the Data Governance Council in 2 weeks. So if we can get, and if, you know, and then they still dig their heels in, I'm like, okay, just know that I'm bringing this to the council and this is skewed this way. If you're okay with that and they're okay with that, then I'm okay with that. There's no point in causing a drama or political conundrum. And sometimes it's valid. I mean, they may be in the middle of a project that is precluding them from carving out the capacity. When are you going to carve out the capacity? Or do we need to add more staffing to it? It's really up to that. But I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I am a servant leader and I'm here to resolve the problems first.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think that brings us to the end of the questions and the end of the session almost. And we got 12 questions and more than 40 people attending the session at some point. So with this note, I think it's about time to close this session, and I think this is last session on track G as far
Thank
as the
you.
conference is concerned.
I think it is. I think the conference is, it might be over.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.